You're listening to Heroes of Healthcare, a series about the bold, selfless, and innovative individuals who are serving our communities with compassion and care. This episode is sponsored by Jackson & Coker Locum Tenens. If you are seeking interim physician or advanced practitioner coverage at your facility, or are a practitioner who is looking for more work-life balance, visit them at jacksonandcoker.com to learn more about their services. Now, let's get into the show.
Welcome to the Heroes of Healthcare podcast. Today's guest, Dr. Jay Wellons, is a true inspiration. Not only is he the chief of pediatric neurosurgery with Vanderbilt University Medical Center, he is also a published author with the New York Times, Times Magazine, Oprah Daily, and most recently released his first book titled All That Moves Us, a pediatric neurosurgeon, his young patients, and their stories of grace and resilience. Dr. Wellons gives us a sneak peek into the moving story shared throughout his memoir and the power of understanding the human condition and leading with compassion in healthcare. I promise you'll have cheers after listening to him. Let's dive in. Dr. Wellons, thank you so much for being a guest on the Heroes of Healthcare podcast.
Well, thank you, Olivia. I'm really excited to be here and for us to have a chance to talk today.
We are excited as well. There has been a lot of buzz and a lot of really wonderful commentary about your latest book, a memoir that was released in July of 2022. Can you tell us a little bit more about All That Moves Us, the book that you wrote, and what inspired this story?
Well, it was it's really been kind of an amazing journey of writing the book, kind of processing the experience of being a pediatric neurosurgeon over the last 21 years, and engaging with the families that I've cared for. Particularly those that were specific to the book. So the subtitle kind of says it all. You know, Olivia, it's a pediatric neurosurgeon, his young patients, and their stories of grace and resilience. But not all of pediatric neurosurgery, ends in a good ending. You know, there's a lot of challenging things that we deal with, and when you stand beside parents when they're dealing with their child that has a diagnosis of a brain tumor, that's a really sad time when they hear it for the first time. And then when they hear about needing to go to the operating room, you can get a sense that, as my chairman, Reed Thompson, says, that, you do get a sense of peace when you have a plan, and then you move through surgery and then you go out and talk to the family and you say, well, good news, they're waking up okay. So that moves from sorrow and grief to joy, and then you tell them about the MRI scan afterwards. How does that look? Hopefully that looks clean of tumor. So that's more joy. And then you get to tell them the diagnosis, which sometimes is malignant, which is sorrow, and sometimes it's benign, and that's joy. So it's this kind of metronomic existence of joy and grief together. And just having the opportunity to reflect back on a long time of taking care of patients and seeing just this resilience that these children and these families have, it just bubbled up to the surface, and it just can't help but impact your own life. I mean, we are living lives just like our patients are, and it's impossible to not let their experiences rub off on you as you care for them on day to day.
Exactly. And I'm so glad you were able to tell your story and to share the resilience of these children. I know it was very inspiring to many and will continue to inspire. But how did you find time and balance to be a pediatric neurosurgeon as well as be the chief of pediatric neurosurgery at Vanderbilt, and then find time to write this?
Well, Olivia, at the time, I had a clinical practice. I was chief, like you said, of the division. And then I was also program director for the residency training program for all the neurosurgery residents, and vice chairman of the department. I'm still vice chairman of the department now, but I was basically going Mach, like warp 9. And then I had this situation where, instead of me, sitting with the family in a clinic room or in the pediatric ICU and talking to them about, okay, here's the tumor. You can see it slice by slice. this is what our plan's going to be. This is when we're going to do it to take it out and how we're going to do it. Instead of me talking about those things, it was me hearing those things about me, because I had a tumor that was in my pelvis and I had to have surgery myself. And fortunately, it was benign. It was initially thought to be malignant, but it was benign. But that degree of existential threat that you go through, that so many people in this world, there are people right now in this hospital within a half-mile radius of me that are going through that existential threat right now about themselves or their child. And even though it's a very specific thing when you have it, it's also something that all of us have in our lives at some point, usually. There's this common thread of your mortality and what your place has been in this world. So as part of having this thing taken out, I had to be on bed rest for about 2.5 months. And so you can imagine going from, warp 9 to being still was something. Fortunately, things healed up with, a few consequences here and there. But I can tell you, when you're laying there, there's only so much Netflix you can watch, And so it was my sister, Sarah, my middle older sister, who said, you need to start writing some of this stuff down, all these stories you've been telling us over the years, because, as you know, Olivia, being from Mississippi, we're natural storytellers, right? I think there's something like, as we walk around barefooted in the dirt, it gets up into our being, something about Mississippi that causes you to do that. But she's the one that got me to start jotting some of these things down. And I wrote a piece and decided I sent it to my wife, who's a critic in a good way. And she said, this was kind of funny. This is a good piece. And so it made its way to the New York Times and got published in the Sunday Review. And I had lots of emails from people saying, hey, congratulations, you got a piece in the Times. You're a funny writer. And that was mostly friends. And then the editor kind of engaged me and said, well, why don't you write a serious piece? You're a pediatric neurosurgeon. And so I did. And after that piece came out, I had hundreds of emails from people saying, gosh, just the amount of hope that comes from that story, it's really powerful. And that's, Olivia, when I began to think about, saying, gosh, I have learned and seen so much from these children and their parents. I just wonder if there's a way that their lives and their sacrifices and their emotions and the things they've gone through can be put down on paper so that others can see that and learn from it too. So that's kind of the genesis of it.
Well, I'm so glad, and many people are very thankful that you're okay. But if that tumor would not have been found, you wouldn't have been on bed rest. You wouldn't have had the opportunity to reflect and put something like this out, maybe until you retired. So the fact that you were able to make time to do this sooner, and that you were urged from your Mississippi roots and your sister to publish this, that's wonderful. Can you share a specific moment or story from the book that holds particular significance for you?
Well, it's like trying to choose between all of your children, right? I mean, like which one you love the most, because you love them all the same. But I will say that that story that was the second story that I was talking about that was published in the Times is actually in the book. It's called 90 Minutes from You by Ground. And it's the story of Jordan. She was 11 at the time. She was involved in a terrible car accident. And this is back when I was working at the Children's Hospital of Alabama. It was in my first year of practice. I had just rounded on a Saturday and sat down at my desk with a cup of coffee and put my feet up on the desk. And it was just pouring. It was torrential rain outside. My window at the time overlooked the street in front of the Children's Hospital, and just terrible rain. And as soon as I put my feet up and set my coffee cup down, I got this page, back in the days when we had pagers. And so I answered the pager, and it was an ER doctor from outside hospital. And he said, basically kind of in a very staccato clipped voice, like, Doc, we have an 11-year-old who's been in a car accident. They've got a subdural hematoma. It took them a while to get out. They're already an hour down. We're a small show. Can you take her? And I'm like, yes, of course. Why don't you have her in the air? Go ahead and get her in the air. And he said, well, the medical helicopters aren't running because the weather's so bad. And I remember even now, I have a picture on my desk of my dad, who's passed away, but he was in the military. And when I was young, my dad used to take me up in a Cessna or a twin engine Aztec that he had. And I was like 7, and he would get up there and he would have me fly. And then he would very, very carefully just like trim the props a little bit, or just change the flaps, or do something to the airspeed, so that I would pick up the fact that the altimeter was going down and that we were tipping down. And then he would have me work the problem, as like, okay, what's the issue? Why is this happening? And so, I just thought to myself, like, working the problem was like what my dad did. And then I sat there and looked at him in this picture, and he's in his Air National Guard uniform. He retired a 2-star general. At the time, he was commander of the Meridian Air Force Base. And I saw the olive drab color of his uniform, and I said to the ER doctor, I said, look, are those Black Hawks? Is that Black Hawk base near you? Because he was 90 minutes from us by ground if he put the girl in an ambulance, which would have put them outside the window of really being able to save her. And he said, you know what, the Black Hawks, let me call them. That's a great idea. I'll call them now. And I said, okay, you call them, I'll call the OR. And so about 30 minutes later, that coffee cup on my desk starts shaking like in Jurassic Park, where you see the footsteps of the Tyrannosaurus.
Yes, and the water's starting to fill, and yes.
So my coffee cup's doing it like thunk, 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 thunk. And then I look up and my window is shaking, thunk, 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 thunk. And then my whole body starts to shake. I can feel it in my chest, and I reach and I look up kind of above the window, and I see through the rain and the swirl, this Black Hawk helicopter is hovering over the children's hospital. And it's getting that girl. They'd gone and picked her up and brought her here. And the rain is swirling, and the dually pickup trucks are being pushed down on their shocks, and that are parked out in front of the hospital, and trash cans are being blown down the street. So I'm like, well, I better get downstairs. So I go downstairs, and they're getting her over from the gurney onto the ER bed, and for us to examine her. And there's 2 of the soldiers are just soaked. They're in their olive drab uniform, their flight uniform, and they're soaked to the bone from flying her. And they get her there, and I walk up, and one of the nurses says, oh, hey, Dr. Wellons, here's your patient. And the younger of the 2 soldiers, I guess, had heard that they needed to deliver them to Dr. Wellons, and he immediately snapped to attention. And I said, look, at ease, soldier, like, we should be saluting you. You guys just saved this girl's life. So we got her into the OR, and she had a blood clot on the side of her brain, and we did what we were supposed to do. We took the blood clot out, and we got her all sewed up. And then, you sit there and you wait to see how she's going to wake up, because beforehand she was comatose. And you wait, and then all of a sudden, she follows commands as she's waking up, and that's a good sign. But it took her a while to really recover. Like, she spent a lot of time in the hospital. She went to rehab, inpatient rehabilitation hospital to help her walk again and move again and learn to talk again. And I would see her improvement in these aliquots. Like, I would see her after she left the hospital, she'd come back to clinic. And then the next 3 months later, and then the family would send me clippings from the newspaper about how Jordan had started going back to school, or how she'd made the honor roll, or how she became the team mascot, cheering. And then at some point you have to discharge people from clinic. Right. It's a wonderful thing to be able to follow these kids over time and see how they're doing. And, well, how's English? What's your least favorite class? That kind of stuff. But you have to let them go, because it's not just important for you because you need to make room for more patients to see you. It's really important for them to have closure, like to say, this chapter of my life is done. I don't need to see the neurosurgeon anymore. So we have to do that. And so we did that. And then I moved to Vanderbilt. Was in my office in Vanderbilt, and instead of me receiving clippings from the family, I received a letter that was handwritten, and it was from Jensen. And it was telling me that she was getting married. And it was telling me how thankful she was for all that had happened in order to get her to this point where she was going to be able to marry this man who she loved and hopefully have a family. And she wanted to say thank you to me and to the ER doctor and to those soldiers and to all the nurses and everybody that took care of her. And I just saw that gratitude just shining up out of that letter. And I thought to myself, gee whiz, Jordan, I'm thankful to her. Jensen, I'm really thankful to her, Olivia, because I had learned so much from just it was early in my career, and how to motivate people, what to expect out of patients, how to get things moving, how to solve problems. And I thought about how many people have really had been affected, how many children and patients have been affected by that experience. So I was grateful to her. And that piece, I think, was one that was really important for me, because not only did it, I think, have an impact on me, that whole experience, but also writing of it, I think, showed a lot of people that there is a lot of hope and a lot of happiness. You don't know what you do at the time, what impact that will have on people in the long term. And so I have to say that piece, and her and her parents, and they came to one of the book talks, and it was amazing. So that'd be the piece probably.
Well, that story gave me chills listening to you tell it throughout. So anyone who's listening to this, I'm sure they're like me and are wanting to go out and buy this book immediately so that they can hear the rest of your inspiration. And the fact that these are true stories, these are stories that you have lived. And the fact that Jordan is now she's married, and who knows if she has children on the way or is a mom now or not, but
yeah, she has a baby.
See, how wonderful. And if it wouldn't, it kind of goes full circle. And your dad, what an inspiration he was to put you at the driver's seat of an airplane at 7 years old and force you to think critically and think on your feet at such a young age when you're in the air and driving this. It's amazing how it really did. It's like things like that are what shaped you into becoming the pediatric neurosurgeon you are today, and able to impact the lives of all the children that you serve.
Yeah, I did feel like that was important, Olivia, to reflect on and talk about in the book. It was about my dad, who did impact me, but also other mentors who've impacted us along the way. There's a piece in there called Bucket Lines, and I really have this concept in my head about how we're all kind of passed from one person to the next. It might be a really engaged, physics professor at boarding school at Macaulay, and then Mississippi, it's the chairman of the English department who really wants you to get a degree in Anglo-Irish literature, and then in medical school it might be a mentor who is a cardiologist who really wants you to learn about the heart, and then in your residency program it's a young pediatric neurosurgeon named Tim George, for me, one of the very few African American pediatric neurosurgeons and neurosurgeons at the time. I see a picture of him. See if I can do it right here. That's me and him operating right there. But Tim was an amazing mentor to me, and so I really wanted to thank them in some way about how they'd impacted me. And then also I wrote about mentees, about the residents that I work with. At the time, and still am really close to the residents here because we spend so much time with them. I think they've heard my same stories over and over again. But that was important for me to get off in the book, to get out in the book too.
You mentioned several things here, but this does allow us the opportunity to go back a little bit. Your path wasn't as traditional as some doctors might have had. You went to school and you had a degree in English to start. At what point, how did that transition from English to becoming a pediatric neurosurgeon?
Well, I loved Anglo-Irish literature, James Joyce, Yeats. Kept thinking to myself, how do you learn about the human condition? And I thought about how, as a physician, that's really an amazing way to stand with patients and also learn about this quote unquote human condition. And so I decided that I would go to medical school. So instead of going and being an English teacher somewhere or being a writer, which I don't think I could have made a living at, I decided to go to medical school and be a family medicine doctor in South Mississippi, get paid in chickens and tomatoes, and then maybe have time to write after a few years. I mean, that.
You would have been seeing my family probably.
I know, that's right. You know that exact person. Yeah, they took care of our family. But then I got into, so it's a stepwise process. So I got into the anatomy lab, and in the anatomy lab, I can remember distinctly seeing the nerves of the body, the brachial plexus, which is this really beautiful group of nerves that come out of the neck, and they're kind of entwined, almost like macrame. And I just remember being absolutely entranced with them. And then, following that into the spinal cord and then up into the brain itself when we had neuroanatomy. I tried over and over again to convince myself to not do neurosurgery. But I just decided that it was for me. So then I got into my residency and liked all aspects of adult and pediatric neurosurgery, but really felt called because of Tim, George, Herb Fuchs, another one of the pediatric neurosurgeons there. And the children, there's something so resilient about the children. And there's just this wisdom that children have about getting better. I was in my clinic a month or so ago, and the little boy was there with headaches, and he had this thing called a Chiari malformation, which is where the back of the brain is too low and it goes down into the spinal cord and it crowds the spinal cord. So I was talking about doing surgery, and he's like 7 or 8. And I was talking about doing surgery with his mom, and I said, "Is it okay if he stays in here?" And she said, "Absolutely, yes." And at the end, I turned to him and I said, "Is there anything that you want to ask me?" And he had written down on a piece of paper, they said, "Thank you very much." That's what he wrote, and he handed it to me. And so I have that here because we did surgery on him about a week or so ago, and he's just the sweetest kid, and he's doing great, And so there's just something so wonderful about that experience that it's just, you want to be able to translate that.
And I love the uplifting side of this. And you mentioned on the flip side, though, there are some times when working with children, and that being your specialty, it can also be just heartbreaking. Can you talk about the other side of that?
Yeah, that's very true. And, oftentimes people say it must be so hard to be a pediatric neurosurgeon just for that reason. And that is hard. I mean, as I was saying before, you can't have a 6-year-old child at home and go in and operate on a 6-year-old child and not feel a sense of commonality with that family. But, in the book, I talk about a little girl named Delilah. She was just as cute as she could be. She was 6 or 7, and she came in blind from a brain tumor. And so we kind of urgently took her to the operating room that day and took out the brain tumor. And I remember I came out to talk to her mom, Leslie, and Leslie was in a prayer circle, like many folks will be appropriately if that's their theologic construct. And she stepped away, and I said, "Well, she's waking up okay, and I think she can see." And she said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, I put my pen out in front of her, and I said, Delilah, when I was in there with her, I said, Delilah, what am I holding out?" And she said, "That's a pen." And then I said, "What am I holding?" She said, "That's your watch." And so her mom, Leslie, just reached out to touch the pen, to be a part of that healing and that waking up. But Delilah's tumor ended up being malignant. And even though we got a good resection on it, after about a year, it came back, and we took her back to the operating room to take it out. And then she needed a couple of other surgeries. And then finally, at the end, I kind of have this thing about how I don't take out stitches, in the book, it's kind of a funny riff. Like, I've got neurosurgeon stuff to do. I don't take out stitches, just to kind of make fun of myself. But when I realized it was going to be the last time I was going to see Delilah, because I think she was going to die pretty soon, I realized I wanted to take out her stitches. I wanted nobody else to do it but me. And I remember sitting there next to the bed. And in the past, where she had been joking or playing the ukulele or demanding ice cream for all of her meals, or telling me I need to get more sleep, or why don't you brush your hair, she
She's
was
bold.
quiet. Yeah, she was spirited. She was quiet, and I just remember taking her stitches out and watching her mom and connecting with her and locking eyes, and her realizing where this was going for Delilah and how hard that was. But then, Olivia having the opportunity to write about her. And then when Penguin Random House did some of the promotion for the book, they reached out to some of the people that were in the book, and her mom got to send pictures and talk about Delilah and answer questions, and on this whole social media thing that Penguin Random House did. It was just a wonderful thing for them to do. And it was such a wonderful thing for the families.
What a special way to let their legacy live on and the memories of them continue to swirl.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you see some of those cute pictures of her, and that's how you remember, you remember them in those days, as opposed to at the very end when there's such sadness and grief.
Well, and you mentioned, and I know that from what I've read in your book, you do talk a great deal about just understanding the human condition. How, in your view, how can aspiring medical professionals incorporate this understanding of the human condition into their practice?
So much about our practices now is about productivity. If you, I always say that it's difficult to march under a flag that has a big green dollar sign on it. You know what I mean? Like, that's just not what most doctors and nurses and healthcare professionals I know are about. Now, some are, right? But not the majority. Like, those of us that are in the trenches taking care of patients, we want to look up and see the flag that we're marching under is the flag of excellent patient care, or the flag of, give me your tired and huddled masses yearning to be free, and, we'll help them, we'll help get them well. That's what we want to march under. And so I think it's important to work for a boss or a person above you or an institution that keeps that in mind, right? Because if it's just all about productivity, that's hard to stay engaged with that. If it's just all about that, if the significant part of the mission has to be making sure that people know that we're prioritizing taking good care of patients. So I think that's one thing. I think you have to stand alongside people that you trust. So the people above you is one thing. Now the people beside you, I think you really need to be able to trust those people, because you want to have them know that when you're on call for their patients, that they don't need to worry, that their patients are going to be well cared for, so that they can enjoy time with their children and their families and their hobbies, whatever it is, rock climbing, scooter riding, breakdancing. I'm just kidding. But whatever it is, right?
They might be back in the hospital if they go out and do breakdancing.
Yeah. I'm picturing one of my partners breakdancing, which is hilarious. But the point is that you want, then when you're not on call, you want to be able to know that your patients are cared for well. And you want to know that when you're making decisions as chief, that they have your back, and that they know you have your back, or whatever, that they have your back. And then the other thing is the people that work, quote unquote, under you, or people that you're responsible for. You want to have people that you enjoy engaging with, that you want to teach. And I think that's one of the reasons why I like academic neurosurgery so much for me, because it's those, you have to really align those three perspectives. And I think that that's doable, not just in academic pediatric neurosurgery, but in healthcare fields, whether you're a doctor or a nurse practitioner or a PA or somebody in management. I think if you have people above you that you respect, beside you that you work well with, and below you that you feel responsible to, I just think that's about the measure for a career that's of great fulfillment, right? Because you're all patient facing, and I think that's important. So and kind of to wrap around to what you're asking, I think having an environment like that's important. And then I think having some type of outlet, for me, it's writing, or giving talks about, various safety topics that we face here in Tennessee or elsewhere as well. I think, having some degree of advocacy is something that's a good outlet. So I think having some type of wellness outlets are really important for people, because if it's just about the metrics, it's just about, hey, they want you to squeeze, 2 more patients in a week or 2 more patients in every Thursday when you do clinic, that's going to lead to this kind of moral burnout that people get that will cause us to, continue to lose physicians and nurses and advanced practitioners at a rate that's just too high to care for the population that we need.
Well, I'm very glad that you are sharing your stories and you're sharing just your perspective, and the residents at Vanderbilt are able to learn from your example, as well as everyone else around you and everyone you're responsible for, along with your peers. One of the things that I found out about you before we recorded this, is that you don't have social media. And I think I admire it. And I think anyone listening to this would admire that. Is there, as far as you sharing your book, was that difficult to get the word out without any sort of social media?
Well, so I did, when the book came out, I was very active in social media. I think that was very important to have. When I was residency program director, I joined Twitter. I wanted to be able to extol my residents that were out doing various things. And so it was an easy pivot to use Twitter for social media, and the same thing for Instagram. But Olivia, I'll be honest with you, after a year plus of doing it, I just had to say that I just had to close that part of my life, because while I know that it was a good outlet for me. I was kind of the guy that went and talked about, hey, Twitter's a good way to, talk about programs that you're involved with and connect with some patients. After a while, social media gets toxic. And it's not necessarily the toxicity like somebody's posting like, hey, you're a dum-dum head. It's not that. It's just sometimes I think you see the worst of society on social media. Because I think the programs now, particularly as Twitter has evolved to X, the programs really are about forcing you into one certain pigeonhole, so that if you only want to respond to left-handed, pigeon-loving, proto-communists, then that's all that's going to be brought to you. And so therefore, it's just a reverberator. And I believe that the way that we should move through this world is by exposing ourselves to other opinions, and by knowing that it is fine to change your mind, that it is completely okay to learn from people that are around you that have different perspectives. And to, if we don't do those things, then we're never going to solve the big problems. We're just going to be shouting at each other across the room. So for me, it was just important to kind of gather back some of my time and reduce my presence on social media. Yeah, that's it.
No, well said, Dr. Wellons. And I think you are going to need some time back, because as I've also just discovered, you were elected to be the president of the American Society of Pediatric Neurosurgery. So congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Olivia. I'm really excited. I'm really honored to be president of the ASPN, this group. It's nearly a 50-year-old society of pediatric neurosurgeons. There's only 250 of us or so in North America. And so the opportunity to kind of represent this group, not just as we continue to evolve as a group, but also with the advocacy that we're doing, with gun safety laws, with transitioning from pediatric care to adult health care. That's a really important topic. Helmet safety. There's just a lot that's within our wheelhouse, within our lane, so to speak, that our group's involved with. So I'm very excited to have the opportunity to do that, and I'm also just fighting this little bit of imposter syndrome, because I remember when I joined I joined the ASPN 20 years ago. I looked up and I saw these giants of pediatric neurosurgery, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm in the same room with these people. And now, they're my colleagues, and now here we go with this new chapter. But I really appreciate it. I'm very honored.
You're leading the charge. Well, and all of these experiences that you're continuing to go through, especially now that you're going to be president, I'm sure there are going to be additional stories and other problems that you're solving that you've never been faced with before. Is that going to be inspiration for another book in the future?
Well, that's a good question. Thank you for asking. It was inspiration for a piece that I put in Time magazine. It was after the Uvalde shootings. And the executive committee of the ASPN, we were sending these emails around like, what do we do? Who do we talk to? Does anybody know a senator? Does anybody know a journalist? We got to do something. And then, a friend of mine who's now the chairman over at Virginia Commonwealth University, he basically said, he said, let's get Wellons to write something. And so I was like, all right, I'll do that. And I wrote about the chaos that we had talking to each other about what to do, because you just feel so helpless. So I do think I want to continue to write. One of the things I've learned is that you can be a pediatric neurosurgeon and be chief of the department and do some research and do some education and write a book. But it's tougher to do all those things, go talk about a book, do some advocacy, and then write another book. So I'm hoping soon in the future, not for another tumor, but maybe for a cabin in the woods, just for a couple of months where I could get away and get some stuff done. But we'll see.
Sounds like Vanderbilt might need to approve a sabbatical.
Oh, I would love that. Can I get you to talk to my dean?
Want it. Well, Dr. Wellons, it has been such a pleasure speaking with you. If anyone is listening, and I'm sure there are plenty that they're wanting to know how they can find these articles that you've written, as well as find your book, All That Moves Us, would the best way to do that would be to Google you or just search your name online and just see all the articles and, of course, the book. It'll pop up on Amazon as well as other outlets. Yeah,
I would say that, there's a piece about gun safety in Time magazine I mentioned. There's a piece in Oprah Daily dealing with, how to handle issues of a fetus that come up and some of the issues that surrounded the reversal of Roe versus Wade that we're dealing with now in pediatric neurosurgery. And then a piece I wrote in Garden and Gun, which is a popular Southern magazine, about being a camp doctor. And there's a few others out there, but I'd love to get anybody's input and be honored if people would read them. So thank you for asking.
Of course. Well, and we'll be sure to post links to all of them that we can find whenever we are able to get this out to the world. And before we leave, we always like to ask, who is your healthcare hero or just your hero?
I've always thought about things in terms of a hybrid. I have so many different aspects of people that I admire. I do have to say that I mentioned my chairman earlier, and this is not me trying to get another a raise or something, but
or a sabbatical.
Or a sabbatical, right? But he's also my very close friend. When I first came to Nashville, he recruited me here, and I was here for a month and a half. And he said, Jay, and our kids are both at the time, our sons were in the first grade. And he said, Jay, I want you to help me coach the baseball team. And I'm like, Reed, you're the chairman of neurosurgery at Vanderbilt, and I just came up here to be your division chief. I'm trying to build this program. And he said, yeah, I know, but I just want you to do it. And we had the best time. We coached for 4 years, our sons. And that last year we won the championship, and it was like we'd won, the World Series, all the boys jumping up and down. It was just amazing. So Reed's the one that is that talks about peace with a plan. And that, I tell you, has just become my mantra. So much, in fact, that I think I've stolen it from Reed. So I try to, make sure that everybody knows that Reed Thompson says it. But my friends are like, you know what Jay says, that whole thing about peace with a plan? That's so true. But I just really admire, how he leads from a really good place. I just think that's so important to engage yourself with a leader who leads from a good place. And that's what I want people to think about me, is that, having people's best interest in mind, really looking and trying to figure out how to grow other people and have them be successful in their career. And that's the best, I think. And all of that in the process, and on top of being an excellent surgeon and just being a good person and being a baseball coach. And I just admire the heck out of him. So, and that's even without the sabbatical or the raise or anything. I just do.
I'll be sure to give Dr. Thompson some credit whenever I share Peace with the Plan with my entire leadership team after this.
That's perfect. I love it.
Well, Dr. Wellons, it has been wonderful. We look forward to following you and staying in touch with you, and most certainly reading your book and hearing more of the stories that inspire us.
Thank you, Olivia. I've loved being here. It's been fun, and I'm glad we had a chance to talk.
Same.
You've been listening to Heroes of Healthcare. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell a friend or leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. You can also visit us at www.heroesofhealthcarepodcast.com for more information or to listen to past episodes. Thanks again to our sponsor, Jackson & Coker Locum Tenens, providing interim physicians and advanced practice staff for over 40 years.